as a fierce snowstorm traps a handful of strangers in the tiny village of Elderglow. The overnight bookshop opens its doors, its lantern glowing like a beacon in the night. Inside, by the flickering firelight, the keeper of stories begins to weave tales of wonder and whimsy. It's a thread that binds the travelers together, turning a stormy night into a tapestry of unforgettable magic. The snow began to fall, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the tiny village of Elderglow in a hush of white. Nestled in a valley cradled by ancient pines, the village was no stranger to winter's embrace. But tonight's storm promised to be fiercer than most. The wind whispered secrets through the narrow streets, swirling flakes against the frost-kissed windows of the overnight bookshop, a modest ivy-covered building that stood at the heart of Elderglow. Its sign, hand-painted with curling letters, glowed faintly under a single lantern, swaying gently in the gathering gale. Inside, the bookshop was a world unto itself. Shelves of dark oak stretched to the ceiling, their surfaces crowded with books of every kind, leather-bound tomes with gilded spines, paperbacks with dog-eared pages, and slim volumes of poetry that seemed to hum with quiet magic. The air carried the scent of aged paper, beeswax candles, and the faint sweetness of chamomile tea brewing on a small stove in the corner. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, its light dancing across the room, painting the walls with shifting shadows. The shop was small, but it felt boundless, as if the stories within its walls could expand to fill any space, any heart. Eleanor Wren, the bookshop's keeper, stood behind the counter, her silver hair loosely braided and her eyes bright despite the late hour. She was a woman of gentle contradictions, soft-spoken yet commanding, with a presence that made the shop feel like an extension of her soul. At 62, Eleanor had spent decades tending to the overnight bookshop, a place that had been in her family for generations. It was said that the shop had a way of knowing when it was needed, and tonight, as the storm grew wilder, Eleanor felt that familiar tug in her chest. The shop was awake, waiting. The bell above the door chimed, a delicate sound nearly lost to the howl of the wind. Eleanor looked up as a young man stumbled in, his coat dusted with snow and his cheeks flushed from the cold. He was tall, with a lanky frame and glasses fogged by the sudden warmth of the shop. He pushed back his hood, revealing a mop of dark curls, and offered a sheepish smile. Sorry to barge in so late, he said, stamping snow from his boots. The roads are a mess, and my car's stuck a mile back. I saw your light, Ellen. Smile was warm, like the glow of the hearth. You're not barging at all. The overnight bookshop is open to anyone who needs it, especially on a night like this. Come in, warm yourself. The young man whose name he later shared was Theo hesitated, only a moment before stepping fully inside, his shoulders relaxing as the door closed behind him. He glanced around, eyes widening at the sight of the shelves, as if he'd stumbled into a treasure trove. This place is incredible, he murmured, almost to himself. Do you really stay open all night? When the occasion calls for it, Eleanor replied, pouring a cup of chamomile tea and sliding it across the counter. And tonight feels like such an occasion. What's your name, traveler? Theo, he said, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. Theo Harper. I was just passing through on my way to the city, but this storm. I don't think I'm going anywhere tonight. Then, you're exactly where you're meant to be, Eleanor said, her voice carrying a hint of mischief, as if she knew something he didn't. Make yourself at home. There's a storm gathering, And I suspect you won't be our only guest. Asterisk as. If on cue, the bell chimed again. This time, a woman entered, her scarf wound tightly around her neck and a knitted cap pulled low over her brow. She was older, perhaps in her 40s, with sharp features softened by exhaustion. She carried a leather satchel slung over one shoulder, and her eyes darted around the shop, taking in every detail with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Asterisk, goodness. It's a beast out there, she said, her voice crisp but kind. I was hoping to catch the last bus to Thornwick, but it's not coming, is it? Asterisk, not in this weather, Eleanor said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. But you're welcome to wait it out here. I'm Eleanor, and this is Theo. T. Asterisk, the woman nodded, unwinding her scarf to reveal a cascade of auburn hair. I'm Lila, she said. Lila Voss. Thank you, this is unexpected, but lovely. Asterisk, before long, the bell chimed a third time, then a fourth. A teenage girl named Mia, with a backpack stuffed to bursting and a sketchbook clutched to her chest, slipped inside, followed by an elderly man named George, who leaned heavily on a cane and muttered about the foolishness of driving in such weather. Each arrival was met with Eleanor's quiet warmth, a cup of tea, and an invitation to settle by the fire. The shop, though small, seemed to expand to accommodate them all. Its corners cozy and inviting, its shelves whispering promises of stories yet untold. Asterisk, the storm outside grew fiercer, the wind rattling the windows and piling snow against the door. The travelers, strangers to one another, sat in a loose circle around the hearth, their faces illuminated by the fire's glow. Theo sipped his tea, his glasses now clear, revealing thoughtful hazel eyes. Leela sat with her satchel at her feet, her posture relaxed but alert, as if she were used to being ready for anything. Mia sketched quietly in her book, her pencil moving in quick, delicate strokes, while George rested his hands on his cane, his weathered face softened by the warmth. Asterisk, Eleanor stood before them, her hands clasped loosely in front of her apron. This shop has seen many storms, she began, her voice steady and soothing like a lullaby. And in every storm, it's become a tradition to share stories. Stories to pass the time, to warm the heart, to remind us we're not alone. Would you like me to begin? Asterisk, the travelers exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Theo was the first to nod, his smile tentative but genuine. I'd love that, he said. It's been a while since I've heard a good story. Asterisk, me too, Lila added, her tone softer now, as if the shop's warmth was melting her guarded edges. Mia looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes bright with interest, and George gave a small grunt of approval, though his lips curved into a faint smile. Asterisk, Eleanor moved to a shelf near the counter, her fingers trailing along the spines until she found what she was looking for, a slim, emerald green book with no title on its cover. She returned to the circle, settling into a worn armchair that seemed made for her, and opened the book to a page marked with a ribbon. The firelight caught the edges of the pages, making them glow like parchment from another time. Asterisk, this is a story about a wanderer, she began, her voice weaving into the quiet like a thread. A wanderer who carried a lantern that never went out, no matter how fierce the storm. Asterisk, as Eleanor read, the words seemed to take shape in the air, conjuring images of windswept cliffs, a lone figure cloaked in starlight, and a lantern that burned with a flame no storm could extinguish. Theo leaned forward, his tea forgotten, while Leela's eyes softened, her hands still in her lap. Mia's pencil paused, her sketchbook open to a half-drawn lantern, its lines mirroring the story's glow. George's eyes drifted half-closed, but his smile lingered, as if the tale stirred memories long buried. Asterisk, the storm raged on outside, but within the overnight bookshop, time seemed to pause. The words flowed, each one a flicker of light in the darkness, binding the travelers together in a moment of shared wonder. Eleanor's voice was a beacon, guiding them through the tale, and the shop itself seemed to listen, its walls humming with the quiet magic of stories told by candlelight. Asterisk. The fire in the overnight bookshop crackled softly, its embers casting a warm glow across the faces of the travelers gathered around it. Eleanor Wren's voice lingered in the air, the final words of her tale about the wanderer's lantern fading, like the last notes of a lullaby. The storm outside howled relentless, piling snow against the bookshop's door, but within these walls, the world felt still, cocooned in the magic of stories. The travelers, Theo, Leela, Mia, and George sat in a quiet reverie, their eyes reflecting the firelight, their hearts tethered to the tale they'd just heard. Asterisk. Eleanor closed the emerald green book with a gentle thud, her fingers brushing the cover as if to thank it for its service. She looked at her guests, her eyes twinkling with a knowing warmth. Stories have a way of finding us when we need them most, she said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of truth. And tonight, I think the shop has more to share. But perhaps one of you would like to tell a story next. Asterisk. The suggestion hung in the air, met with a moment of silence. Theo shifted in his chair, his fingers tapping the rim of his now cold teacup. Lila's gaze flicked to her satchel, as if a story might be hidden within its folds. Mia clutched her sketchbook a little tighter, her cheeks flushing, while George's weathered hands tightened on his cane, his eyes distant but thoughtful. Asterisk. I'm not much for storytelling, George said at last, his voice gravelly but kind, but I'll listen. Been a while since I sat still long enough to hear a good tale. Asterisk. Mia glanced up, her pencil hovering over her sketchbook. I don't know any stories, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Not like the one you told. Anyway, but I could draw one, maybe. Asterisk. Eleanor's smile was encouraging, like sunlight breaking through clouds. A story doesn't always need words. Mia, if you'd like to share what you see in your heart, we'd be honored to witness it. Asterisk. Mia hesitated, then nodded, flipping to a fresh page in her sketchbook. Her pencil moved tentatively at first, then, with growing confidence, sketching lines that seemed to dance in the firelight. The others leaned forward, curious, as the shape of a tree emerged, a gnarled, ancient thing with branches that reached like arms toward the sky. Beneath it, a figure stood, small but resolute, holding a glowing orb that echoed the lantern from Eleanor's tale. Asterisk. As Mia drew, Eleanor rose quietly and moved to the stove, refilling the kettle and setting it to boil. The soft whistle of steam blended with the storm's distant roar, creating a harmony that felt like the shop itself was breathing. She poured fresh tea, passing cups to each traveler, her movements graceful and unhurried. Stories come in many forms, she said, settling back into her armchair. And sometimes they choose who tells them next. Asterisk. Theo cleared his throat, his glasses catching the fire's glow. I might have won, he said, surprising himself with the words. It's not much, just something my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid. But it feels right for tonight. Asterisk. Eleanor's eyes sparkled. We'd love to hear it, Theo. The shop has a way of making every story feel like it belongs. Asterisk Theo took a deep breath, setting his teacup on the small table beside him. He pushed his curls back, his voice steady but tinged with nostalgia. "This is a story about a boy who could hear the wind sing," he began. "Not just howl or whistle, but really sing songs of places it had been, of mountains and seas and forgotten valleys." Asterisk, as Theo spoke, his words wove a tapestry of their own. He described a boy named Eli, who lived in a village not unlike Elderglow, where the wind carried melodies only he could hear. Each night, Eli would climb to the highest hill, listening as the wind sang of distant lands, a desert where stars fell like rain, a forest where trees whispered secrets, a city where clocks ticked backward. The boy's gift was both a blessing and a burden, for the songs filled him with longing to see the world, yet tethered him to his home, where his family needed him. Asterisk, Theo's voice, though hesitant at first, grew stronger, carrying the same quiet magic as Eleanor's. Leela listened intently, her sharp edges softening further, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. Mia's pencil paused, her sketch now showing the boy on the hill, his silhouette framed by swirling winds. George's eyes were half closed, but his faint smile suggested he was lost in the story, perhaps remembering his own days of longing for far-off places. Asterisk, outside, the storm seemed to pause, as if the wind itself was listening to Theo's tale. The bookshop's windows rattled less fiercely, and the fire burned brighter, casting long shadows that danced with the rhythm of his words. Eleanor sat back, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze warm and approving. The shop felt alive, its shelves almost humming, as if the books themselves were leaning in to hear. Asterisk, when Theo reached the story's end, Eli choosing to stay in his village but teaching its people to hear the wind's songs, the room fell into a gentle silence. The fire popped and a log shifted, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Theo ducked his head, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "That's it," he said. "I don't know if it was any good, but it felt nice to tell it." Asterisk, it was beautiful, Lila said softly, surprising everyone with her warmth. "It reminds me of something I read once, about how stories are like maps. They show us where we've been and where we might go." Asterisk, Eleanor nodded, her eyes crinkling with delight. "Exactly so, Lila. Stories are our guides, our companions. And this shop has a way of collecting them, night after night, storm after storm." Asterisk, Mia looked up from her sketchbook, her drawing. Now complete a vivid scene of Eli on his hill, the wind curling around him like music made visible. She turned it toward the group, her cheeks pink but her eyes bright. "This is what I saw," she said simply, and the others leaned closer, marveling at the detail, the life in her lines. Asterisk, George chuckled, a low, warm sound. "You've got a gift, girl. That's a story in itself." Asterisk, Eleanor rose, crossing to a shelf and selecting another book, this one bound in deep blue, its edges worn but cherished. "Shall we continue?" she asked, her voice an invitation. "The night is long, and the storm has more to teach us." Asterisk, the travelers nodded, their faces glowing with anticipation. The shop seemed to settle around them, its walls embracing the moment, its candles flickering like stars. As Eleanor opened the blue book, the firelight caught her silver braid, and her voice began to weave another Taylor story of a river that carried dreams to those who dared to follow it. Asterisk, the storm raged on, but inside the overnight bookshop, time was measured not in hours but in stories, each one a thread in the tapestry of the night. The travelers, Strangers no longer, leaned closer, their hearts warmed by the keeper of stories and the sanctuary she tended. The overnight bookshop seemed to hum with a quiet energy as Eleanor's voice wove the tale of the dream-carrying river, her words flowing like the water she described. The fire in the hearth burned steadily, its golden light bathing the travelers in warmth, casting their shadows against the towering shelves. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, a wild symphony of wind and ice, but within the shop's walls, there was only the soft crackle of logs, the rustle of turning pages, and the shared breath of those gathered around the fire. Theo, Lila, Mia, and George sat in a loose circle, their faces softened by the stories, their differences melting into the shared glow of the moment. Eleanor closed the blue book, her fingers lingering on its worn cover, as if reluctant to let the story go. She looked at her guests, her eyes gentle but searching, as if she could see the stories they carried within them. The river in that tale carried dreams, she said, her voice a soothing murmur. But I think this shop carries something similar. Each of you has brought something here tonight, piece of yourselves, perhaps waiting to be shared. The travelers exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and quiet vulnerability. The fire popped, sending a spark spiraling upward, and the air felt charged with possibility. Leela shifted in her chair, her satchel resting against her feet like a silent companion. She reached for it, hesitating, then pulled out a small, weathered notebook, its edges frayed from use. "I don't usually share this," she said, her voice low but steady, "but tonight feels different. I've got something that might fit." Eleanor's smile was encouraging, like a lantern in the dark. "We'd be honored, Lila. Shop is listening." Leela opened the notebook, her fingers brushing the pages with care. "It's not a story, exactly," she began, "more like fragments. Things I've written down over the years from places I've been. I travel a lot for work, and I collect bits of conversations, descriptions of places, feelings that don't quite fit anywhere else. Maybe I can weave them into something for you." The others leaned forward, drawn by her quiet intensity. Theo adjusted his glasses, his eyes bright with interest. Mia tucked her sketchbook against her chest, her pencil still, while George's weathered hands rested on his cane, his gaze fixed on Lila with a kind of patient respect. Lila cleared her throat, her voice gaining strength as she began. "There was a woman in a market in Marrakesh," she read, her hands stained with henna, selling baskets woven from river reeds. She laughed like the sun breaking through clouds, and when I asked her name, she said, "Call me the wind, for I am always moving." Her words painted vivid pictures, a dusty road in Tuscany, where a boy played a violin for passing strangers. A cliffside in Ireland where the sea roared like a living thing. A quiet temple in Kyoto where cherry blossoms fell like soft apologies. Each fragment was a snapshot, a moment captured in Lila's careful prose. And as she read, her voice grew warmer, less guarded, as if the act of sharing was unlocking something within her. The shop seemed to lean in, its shelves almost breathing. With the rhythm of her words, Mia began to sketch again, her pencil moving swiftly, capturing the henna-stained hands, the violin's curve, the cherry blossoms fall. Theo listened with a faint smile, as if Lila's fragments reminded him of his own wanderings. George nodded slowly, his eyes distant, as if her words stirred memories of his own long-ago travels. When Lila finished, she closed the notebook gently. Her cheeks flushed, but her expression lighter, as if a weight had lifted. "That's all I've got for now," she said, almost shyly. "I don't know if it was a story, but it's what I carry with me." It was a story, Eleanor said, her voice warm with certainty. "A story of the world, told through your eyes. Thank you, Lila." Mia held up her sketchbook, revealing a page filled with quick, vivid drawings, a collage of Lila's moments, each one alive with detail. "This is what I saw," she said softly, and the group murmured in appreciation, marveling at how her art had woven Lila's words into something tangible. George chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "You two make a fine pair," he said, nodding at Lila and Mia. "Words and pictures, telling the same tale. Makes me feel like I've been to those places myself." Eleanor rose, crossing to the stove to refill the teapot. The soft clink of porcelain and the hiss of steam blended with the storm's distant howl, creating a comforting rhythm. She poured fresh tea, passing cups to each traveler, her movements deliberate, as if each gesture was part of the night's ritual. "The fire brings us together," she said, settling back into her armchair. "And the stories keep us here. Would anyone else like to share?" Theo glanced at Mia, who shook her head slightly, her shy smile suggesting she was content with her sketches for now. George rubbed his chin, his eyes twinkling. "I'm not one for spinning tales," he said, "but I've got a memory or two. Lived in Elderglow my whole life, you know. Seen this shop through many a storm." "Tell us," Theo said, his voice eager. "What's this place like when the snow comes?" George leaned back, his cane resting across his knees. "This shop," he began, his voice slow and rich. "It's more than just books. Always has been. Back when I was a boy, Eleanor's mother ran it, and she'd do just what Eleanor's doing. Now open the doors when the storms came, let folks in, tell stories till dawn. One night, must have been 63 or 64, a blizzard hit so hard it buried the village. I was maybe 10, snuck out to see the snow. Got lost, of course, half frozen by the time I stumbled here." He paused, his eyes softening. "Mother took me in, gave me tea just like this, told me a story about a boy who tamed a wolf made of snow. Kept me warm, kept me safe. I never forgot it. This shop, it's got a heart, you know. It knows when you need it." The travelers listened, spellbound, as George's memory painted a picture of the bookshop as a timeless refuge, its walls steeped in kindness and stories. Eleanor's eyes glistened, though her smile was steady, as if George's words were a gift she hadn't expected. "That's beautiful, George," Lila said, her voice soft. "It makes this place feel alive." "It is," Eleanor said simply, her gaze sweeping the room. "And it's glad you're all here." She reached for another book, this one bound in soft brown leather, its pages yellowed with age. "Shall we continue?" she asked, her voice an invitation to dive deeper into the night's magic. The travelers nodded, their faces glowing with anticipation, their hearts bound by the stories they'd shared and the ones yet to come. The fire burned on, a steady heartbeat, and the overnight bookshop held them close, a haven in the storm. The overnight bookshop seemed to glow from within, its walls bathed in the soft light of the hearth and the flickering candles perched on every available surface. The storm outside had settled into a steady roar, the wind weaving through Elderglow, pines like a chorus of restless spirits, but inside, the air was warm and still, scented with chamomile and old paper. The travelers, though, Leela, Mia, and George sat in their circle by the fire, their faces softened by the stories they'd shared and heard. Each tale, whether spoken or drawn, had knit them closer. Strangers, no longer but companions bound by the magic of the night. Eleanor Wren sat in her armchair, the brown leather book open in her lap, its pages whispering as she turned them. Her silver braid caught the firelight, and her eyes held a quiet spark, as if she could feel the shop's pulse quickening with each story told. "This shop has always been a place for wonder," she said, her voice a gentle thread weaving through the room. "And the tales we tell here, they carry a bit of whimsy, a bit of magic, to light up even the darkest storms. Shall I share another?" Yes. "Please," Mia said softly, her sketchbook resting on her knees, her pencil poised as if ready to capture whatever images Eleanor's words might conjure. Theo nodded, his glasses reflecting the fire's glow, while Leela leaned forward, her notebook tucked safely back in her satchel. George gave a small grunt of approval, his hands folded over his cane. His weathered face relaxed in the warmth. Eleanor's fingers traced the page, and she began. "Once, in a forest where the trees grew upside down, their roots reaching for the stars, there lived a girl who could speak to shadows." Her voice painted a world of impossible beauty, of forest where moonlight pooled like water, where shadows danced with voices of their own, whispering secrets to the girl who called them friends. The girl, named Lyra, learned to weave their whispers into songs that could mend broken hearts or summon forgotten dreams. But the shadows were fickle, and one day they asked for a song. Lyra wasn't sure she could sing a song to call back the sun, which had vanished behind a veil of endless night. As Eleanor spoke, the shop seemed to shift, its walls fading into the upside-down forest, its shelves echoing with the shadows' whispers. Mia's pencil flew across her sketchbook, sketching Lyra with her hair like starlight, surrounded by shadowy forms that curled like smoke. Theo listened with a faint smile, his hands still, as if afraid to break the spell. Lila's eyes were wide, her breath slow, as if she could see the forest in her mind's eye. George's gaze was distant, but his lips curved, as if Lyra's courage reminded him of someone he'd once known. The fire crackled, its light dancing across the travelers' faces, and the storm outside seemed to soften, as if listening to Eleanor's tale. The story unfolded with a rhythm of its own. Lyra's journey to find the sun, her encounters with a fox made of moonlight, a river that sang lullabies, and a tree that offered riddles instead of fruit. Each moment was vivid, whimsical, yet laced with a quiet ache, as Lyra learned that to sing the sun back, she'd have to give up her shadow voice forever. When Eleanor reached the stories, and Lyra's song soaring through the forest, the sun breaking through the night, her shadows falling silent, the room held its breath. The fire popped, a single spark spiraling upward, and the travelers sat in a hush, as if the story had left a piece of itself in each of them. That was beautiful, Theo said at last, his voice soft. "It felt like I was there, in that forest." "It's the shop," George said, his tone gruff but warm. "Always makes the stories feel real. Always has." Mia turned her sketchbook around, revealing a page filled with Lyra's world, upside-down trees, shadows curling like ribbons, the sun breaking through in a burst of light. "This is what I saw," she said, her voice shy but proud. The others murmured in awe, marveling at how her drawings seemed to breathe with the story's magic. Leela leaned back, her fingers brushing her satchel. "That story makes me want to write again," she said, almost to herself. "Something about light and shadows, something new." Eleanor's smile was like a candle's flame, steady and warm. "That's what stories do," she said. "They spark new ones in all of us. Would anyone like to add to our night's tapestry?" The travelers exchanged glances, a quiet understanding passing between them. Theo rubbed the back of his neck, his shy smile returning. "I don't think I can top that," he said, "but I've got another one my grandmother used to tell. It's shorter, but it's whimsical in its own way." "Go on," Lila said, her voice encouraging. "We're all ears." Theo took a sip of his tea, now lukewarm, and began. "There was a village where the stars fell every night, not to burn out, but to rest in the fields like fireflies." His story was simpler than Eleanor's, but no less enchanting, a tale of a baker who collected fallen stars in her apron, baking them into bread that made people dream of the sky. The villagers, once afraid of the dark, learned to love the night, their dreams filled with constellations and comets. Theo's voice, though less polished than Eleanor's, carried a sincerity that warmed the room, each word a small gift to the group. Mia sketched as he spoke, her pencil capturing the baker's flour-dusted hands, the stars glowing in her apron. Leela listened with a quiet intensity, her fingers twitching as if itching to write. George nodded along, his eyes half closed, a faint smile tugging at his lips as if the story reminded him of simpler days. When Theo finished, the shop felt fuller, as if the stories were piling up like snowdrifts, soft and glowing. Eleanor reached for the teapot, refilling cups with a practiced grace, the steam curling like a whisper of the tales they'd shared. "Whimsy has a way of finding us," she said, her voice a gentle invitation. "And I think this night has more wonders to offer." The travelers nodded, their faces alight with anticipation, their hearts tethered to the fire's glow. The storm outside was a distant song now, its fury no match for the warmth of the overnight bookshop, where tales of wonder and whimsy wove a magic all their own. The overnight bookshop seemed to hold its breath as the firelight flickered, casting a soft, golden glow across the travelers' faces. The storm outside had softened into a steady murmur, the wind weaving through elder-glow's snow-laden pines, like a distant lullaby. Inside, the air was thick with the warmth of shared stories, the scent of chamomile tea, and the quiet hum of the shop itself, as if its shelves were whispering secrets to those who listened closely. Theo, Lila, Mia, and George sat in their circle by the hearth, their eyes bright with the tales they'd heard and told, their hearts knit together by the magic of the night. Eleanor Wren sat in her armchair, the brown leather book now closed. In her lap, her hands resting gently on its cover. Her silver braid gleamed in the firelight, and her smile was like a candle's flame, steady and inviting. "The night has a way of speaking to us," she said, her voice soft as a whisper. "In the quiet, in the shadows, it tells its own stories. Perhaps one of you hears a whisper tonight, something waiting to be shared." The travelers exchanged glances, a gentle hush settling over them. The fire popped, a spark drifting upward, and the shop seemed to lean closer, its walls alive with the echoes of tales already told. Theo adjusted his glasses, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair, while Lila's gaze drifted to the window, where snowflakes danced against the glass. Mia hugged her sketchbook, her pencil still, her expression thoughtful. George's weathered hands tightened on his cane, his eyes glinting with a spark of mischief. Asterisk, I might have something, Mia said at last, her voice barely above a whisper, so soft it seemed to blend with the storm's murmur. Her cheeks flushed, but her eyes were steady, as if the shop's warmth had given her courage. It's not a story like yours, Eleanor, or Theo's, or Lila's. It's something I made up, just now, looking at the fire. Asterisk, Eleanor's smile widened, her eyes crinkling with delight. That's the best kind of story, Mia. One that comes straight from the heart. We're all listening. Asterisk, Mia took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the edges of her sketchbook. It's about a fire, she began, her voice tentative but growing stronger. Not like this one, but a fire that lived in a lantern, carried by a girl who walked through a city where everyone was asleep. Asterisk, her story unfolded like a delicate thread, spun from the firelight itself. The girl, named Ember, carried a lantern that held a tiny, living flame, one that whispered to her of forgotten joys, lost hopes, and quiet dreams. The city was cloaked in a strange slumber, its people dreaming but never waking, their lives frozen in grey. Ember's flame could wake them, but only if she shared a piece of its light. And each time she did, the flame grew smaller, threatening to leave her in darkness. Asterisk, Mia's voice, though soft, carried a quiet power, her words painting a city of cobblestone streets, shuttered windows, and rooftops dusted with frost. The travelers listened, spellbound, as Ember moved through the city, waking a baker with a spark that smelled of warm bread, a musician with a flicker that sang like a violin, a child with a glow that laughed like sunlight. Theo leaned forward, his glasses catching the fire's glow, while Leela's hands stilled in her lap, her eyes wide with wonder. George's faint smile deepened, as if Mia's tale stirred memories of his own long-ago dreams. Asterisk, as Mia spoke, she opened her sketchbook, her pencil moving almost without thought. The pages filled with images of Ember's lantern, its flame curling like a living thing, and the city waking in bursts of color against the gray. The shop seemed to hum, its shelves vibrating with the rhythm of her story, as if the books themselves were nodding in approval. The storm outside faded to a distant whisper, the wind harmonizing with Mia's voice, as if the night itself was part of her tale. Asterisk, when Mia reached the end, Ember giving the last of her flame to wake an old woman who held the city's heart. The lantern going dark, but the city blazing with life. The room fell into a gentle silence. The fire crackled, its light dancing across Mia's sketchbook, where the final drawing showed Ember standing in the glowing city, her face serene despite the empty lantern in her hands. Asterisk, that was incredible, Leela said, her voice soft with awe. Mia, you made that up just now? Asterisk, Mia nodded, her cheeks pink but her smile bright. The fire gave it to me, she said simply, glancing at the hearth. And this place? Asterisk, George chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. That's the shop for you. Pulls stories out of folks like water from a well. Asterisk, Eleanor's eyes glistened, her hands clasped in her lap. Mia, that was a gift, she said. A story of light and sacrifice, whispered by the night itself. Thank you. Asterisk, Theo reached for his teacup, his smile thoughtful. It makes me think of how stories are like that flame, he said. You give a piece of them away, and they light up something in someone else. Asterisk, the travelers nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. The shop felt fuller, as if Mia's story had added another layer to its walls, another spark to its heart. Eleanor rose, crossing to the stove to refill the teapot, her movements graceful and unhurried. The soft hiss of steam and the clink of porcelain blended with the storm's whispers, creating a soothing rhythm. She poured fresh tea, passing cups to each traveler. Her smile, a quiet invitation to linger in the moment. Asterisk, shall we hear another? Whisper, she asked, settling back into her armchair. Her gaze swept the group, warm and expectant. Asterisk, Leela hesitated, then reached for her satchel, pulling out her notebook again. I've got something, she said, her voice steadier now, as if Mia's courage had kindled her own. It's short, just a poem I wrote a while back, but it feels right for tonight. Asterisk, go on, George said, his tone encouraging, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. Asterisk, Leela opened her notebook, her fingers tracing the words she'd written. It's called Night's Whisper, she began, her voice clear and soft. The poem was brief but vivid, a string of images, moonlight on snow, a voice in the wind, a heart beating in time with the stars. Each line felt like a breath, a moment caught and released, and the travelers listened with quiet reverence, as if the poem were a prayer for the night. Asterisk, when Lila finished, the shop seemed to sigh, its candles flickering as if in agreement. Mia sketched a single image, a star reflected in a snowflake, while Theo and George nodded, their faces glowing with appreciation. The fire burned on, a steady heartbeat, and the overnight bookshop held them close, its whispers weaving through the night. The overnight bookshop glowed like a beacon in the heart of Elderglow, its windows frosted with snow but warm with the light of candles and the steady fire in the hearth. The storm outside had settled into a soft, rhythmic patter, the wind no longer a howl but a gentle sigh, as if it too were listening to the tales spun within the shop's walls. The air inside was thick with the scent of chamomile tea, old books, and the faint sweetness of beeswax, creating a cocoon of comfort that wrapped around the travelers, Leela, Mia, and George. They sat in their circle by the fire, their faces softened by the stories they'd shared, their hearts bound by a quiet, unspoken connection that had grown with each tale. Asterisk, Eleanor Wren sat in her armchair, her silver braid catching the flicker of candlelight, her eyes warm with the kind of knowing that comes from years of tending stories. The brown leather book rested in her lap, closed for now, but the shop itself seemed alive with the echoes of the tales told, Lyra's shadow songs, Eli's wind melodies, Ember's lantern flame, and Lila's whispered poem. The shelves hummed, faintly, as if the books were murmuring their approval, and the fire crackled, a steady heartbeat in the room. Asterisk, the night has woven us together, Eleanor said, her voice soft as the snow outside. Strangers at the start, but now something more. The stories we share, they're like threads, tying us to one another, to this place. Does anyone feel another thread waiting to be pulled? Asterisk, the travelers exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting the fire's glow, their expressions a mix of contentment and quiet courage. The shop had worked its magic, loosening the guards they'd carried, drawing out pieces of themselves they hadn't expected to share. Theo ran a hand through his curls, his smile shy but warm. Leela's fingers rested on her notebook, her posture relaxed, as if the act of sharing her poem had unburdened her. Mia hugged her sketchbook, her cheeks still flushed from her story, her eyes bright with possibility. George leaned back, his cane across his knees, his weathered face softened by a smile that spoke of memories stirred. Asterisk, I've got something, George said at last, his voice low and gravelly, but rich with warmth. Not a story like yours, Eleanor, or Mia's. More a memory, I suppose. but it feels right to share it here with you folks. Asterisk Eleanor's smile was like a candle's flame, steady and inviting. A memory is a story, George, and this shop loves them all. We're listening. Asterisk George nodded, his hands tightening briefly on his cane before relaxing. Back when I was younger, must have been 50 years ago, used to come to this shop with my brother, Sam. We'd sneak in on winter nights, just like this one, when the snow was thick and the village was quiet. Eleanor's mother, Clara, she'd be here, same as you, telling stories to anyone who wandered in. Sam loved the tales of heroes and far-off places. He'd sit right there. George nodded toward Theo's chair, eyes big as moons, drinking it all in. Asterisk, he paused, his gaze drifting to the fire, as if seeing his brother's face in the flames. One night, Clara told a story about a bridge that only appeared when you needed to cross something you couldn't face alone. Sam never forgot it, said it made him feel like he could face anything, long as he had someone beside him. We made a pact, me and him, right here in this shop. We'd always be each other's bridge, no matter what. Asterisk George's voice grew softer, tinged with a quiet ache. Sam passed a long time ago, but that pact, it stayed with me. Every time I come here, I feel him, like he's still sitting by the fire, listening. This shop, it's more than a place. It's where bonds are made, where they hold fast, even when the years try to pull them apart. Asterisk the room fell into a gentle silence, the fire's crackle the only sound. Theo's eyes were soft, his glasses catching the light as he nodded, as if George's memory resonated with his own sense of family. Leela's hand rested on her notebook, her expression tender, as if the story had touched a hidden part of her. Mia sketched quietly, her pencil tracing the outline of a bridge stretching across a starry sky, its arches glowing with a warmth that echoed George's words. Asterisk, that's beautiful, George, Eleanor said, her voice a soothing balm. This shop has always been a place for bridges between people, between stories, between hearts. Thank you for sharing Sam with us. Asterisk George gave a small nod, his smile faint but genuine. Felt good to tell it, he said. Like he's here. In a way. Asterisk Mia turned her sketchbook around, revealing the bridge she'd drawn. Its lines delicate but strong, spanning a river of stars. This is for Sam, she said softly, and George's eyes glistened, though he covered it with a quick blink and a gruff chuckle. Asterisk, you've got a gift, girl, he said. That's him, all right, right there in the stars. Asterisk, the traveler smiled, a quiet laughter rippling through the group, warm and unforced. The shop seemed to glow brighter, its candles flickering as if in agreement, its shelves humming with the weight of the moment. Eleanor rose, crossing to the stove to refill the teapot, her movements a familiar ritual that grounded the night. The soft hiss of steam and the clink of cups blended with the storm's distant whispers, creating a harmony that felt like the shop's heartbeat. Asterisk, as she poured fresh tea, Eleanor's gaze swept the group, her smile warm and expectant. The night's not done with us yet, she said, settling back into her armchair. And I think the shop has one more tale to offer. Asterisk, she reached for a new book, this one bound in soft grey cloth, its edges frayed but cherished like a well-loved memory. This is a story about a clockmaker, she began, her voice weaving into the quiet, who built a clock that didn't measure time, but something far more precious. Asterisk, as Eleanor read, her words conjured a village where time moved strangely, where the clockmaker's creation ticked with the rhythm of kindness, courage, and love. The travelers leaned closer, their faces glowing in the candlelight, their bonds forged stronger with each word. The storm outside was a distant murmur now, no match for the warmth of the overnight bookshop, where stories wove strangers into friends, and the night held them close in its gentle embrace. The overnight bookshop seemed to soften as the first hints of dawn crept through the frosted windows, the storm's last whispers fading into a quiet hush. The fire in the hearth burned low, its embers casting a gentle glow across the travelers Theo, Lila, Mia, and George, who sat in their circle, their faces warm with the stories that had filled the night. The air was rich with the scent of chamomile tea. The faint smokiness of candles burned nearly to their stubs, and the comforting musk of old books. The shop itself felt like a living thing, its shelves still humming faintly with the echoes of tales told of lanterns and shadows, wind songs and bridges, clocks that ticked with kindness. Eleanor Wren sat in her armchair, the grey cloth book now closed in her lap, her hands resting lightly on its cover as if reluctant to let the night's magic go. Her silver braid gleamed in the dim light, and her eyes held a quiet contentment, as if she could feel the shop's gratitude for the stories shared. The clockmaker's tale had ended with the village learning to live by the rhythm of their hearts, and the travelers had sat in a gentle silence, savoring the story's warmth like the last sip of tea. The night has been kind to us, Eleanor said, her voice soft as the dawn's first light. It's brought us together, given us stories to carry forward. But the storm is easing, and soon the world will call you back. Before it does anyone have one last tale to share? The travelers exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting. The embers glow, their expressions a mix of reluctance and peace. The bonds they'd forged through the night through laughter, sketches, poems, and memories felt as tangible as the fire's warmth. Theo adjusted his glasses, a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. Leela's fingers brushed her notebook, her posture relaxed, as if the shop had smoothed away her edges. Mia held her sketchbook close, her cheeks still flushed with the courage of her storytelling. George leaned on his cane, his weathered face softened by a smile that spoke of a heart made lighter. I think we've said what the night needed, George said at last, his voice low but warm. But I'll carry this with me, same as I've carried this shop's stories all these years. Mia nodded, her voice shy but steady. I've got all these pictures now, she said, patting her sketchbook. They're like pieces of everyone here. I don't think I'll ever forget. Tonight, Theo chuckled softly, running a hand through his curls. I didn't expect to end up here, but I'm glad I did. These stories, they're like a map for the road ahead. Lila's eyes flickered to the window, where the sky was turning a soft grey, the snow no longer falling but settling into drifts that sparkled faintly. I've travelled a lot of places, she said, but this shop, it's something else. I think I'll write about it someday. Eleanor's smile was like the dawn itself, gentle and full of promise. You're all welcome back, whenever the road brings you here, she said. The shop will be waiting, with new stories to tell. She rose, crossing to the stove where the teapot sat, now nearly empty. The soft clink of porcelain felt like a farewell, a final note in the night's symphony. Instead of pouring more tea, she moved to the counter, retrieving a small tin of biscuit shortbread, dusted with sugar, baked that morning. She passed the tin around, and the travelers each took one, the simple act of sharing food sealing the bond they'd formed. As they nibbled the biscuits, the shop seemed to shift, its walls catching the first true light of morning. The candles had burned low, their flames mere flickers now, but the fire in the hearth held steady, a last gift of warmth. Outside, the storm had given way to a quiet world, the snow blanketing Elderglow in a pristine hush. The travelers began to stir, gathering their belongings with slow, reluctant movements. Theo, his scarf; Lila, her satchel; Mia, her sketchbook; George, his cane. Eleanor moved to the door, her hand pausing on the handle as she turned to face them. "The overnight bookshop doesn't just open for storms," she said, her voice carrying a quiet promise. "It opens for those who need it, and it'll be here whenever you do." Theo was the first to step forward, offering a shy smile. "Thanks, Eleanor, for the tea, the stories, everything." Leela followed, her expression softer than it had been when she'd arrived. "I'll be back," she said simply, and Eleanor nodded, as if she'd known it all along. Mia hesitated, then stepped forward, holding out her sketchbook. She'd torn out a single-pager drawing of the shop, its windows glowing against the snowy night, the travelers' silhouettes visible within. "For you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "So you remember us." Eleanor took the drawing, her eyes glistening. "I'll treasure it," she said, tucking it carefully into the grey book. "And the shop will, too." George was last, his steps slow but steady. He paused before Eleanor, his hand resting on his cane. "You're just like your mother, you know," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Keeping this place alive, keeping us alive, in a way." Eleanor's smile was warm, her hand briefly touching his arm. "Thank you, George, for bringing Sam back tonight." One by one, they stepped into the dawn, the cold air sharp but kind, the snow crunching under their boots. The sky was a pale lavender now, the first rays of sunlight glinting off the drifts, turning Elderglow into a dreamscape. The travelers lingered a moment outside the shop, their breath visible in the crisp air. Their faces turned toward one another with quiet smiles. No words were needed, the night had said enough. As they parted ways, Theo toward his car, Leela toward the bus stop, Mia toward her aunt's house, George toward his cottage down the lane. The overnight bookshop stood behind them, its lantern still glowing faintly, its door already closed but never truly locked. Inside, Eleanor began to tidy, stacking teacups, straightening books, her movements unhurried. The shop seemed to settle, its shelves quiet now, but content, as if it too was savoring the night's stories. The dawn had arrived, gentle and sure, and the travelers carried its light with them. Along with the warmth of the tales they'd shared, the bonds they'd forged, and the promise of a shop that would always be waiting.